Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Science and Paranormal podcast with Dr. Yana and Dr. Elliott. And today we have a fantastic guest whom I had the pleasure of ready to converse and deal on a more personal level, doing some sort of therapy. And therapy was a dream therapy. That was fantastic. Well, Dr. Dillard is a psychotherapist, educator, and author of over 20 books on escaping life drama, which we all need in this life. There's not one single person who does not have drama in their lives. And if you say that you don't, you're lying to yourself. We know that. On waking up, on dreaming, dream sociometry, nightmares, near death experiences, and meditation. Dr. Joseph Dillard is a life coach and seminar leader teaching integral deep listening to students in Berlin and at the beautiful Toscana Therme in Bad Solsa, Thuringia, Germany. Did I pronounce it correctly, Dr. Dillard?
Very good.
Well, welcome, Dr. Dillard. It is so fantastic to have you back with us.
Thank you, my dear. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to talk about dreams and dream sociometry. The approach that I use with dreams was a surprise to me. It was an absolute surprise. It was far from my roots. My roots were in the Edgar Cayce readings and Carl Jung, very much interpretive symbolic approaches, the work of Freud, of course. All of these are symbolic, starting back in ancient Egypt with some of the scrolls that we have of dream interpretations. Artemidorus in Rome wrote a very important early text on dream interpretation. These are all symbolic, and the symbolic approaches are all about finding out what a dream means based on symbols. That is, what does a man with a knife symbolize to me? And then if we're in a group, people will chime in and they will come up with their own interpretations of what that would be for them. And then if somebody's interpretation strikes a chord, then a person goes, aha, they get an insight, they assume that that's the interpretation, and there you have it. Well, that's what I worked with for years with dreams. I taught dream groups in 7 states, traveling when I was, I guess about 19 or 20, southern states in the United States, and basically taught dream interpretation approaches based on the interpretive dream interpretations from the Edgar Cayce readings mostly. And since we're talking about the paranormal, I suppose I should talk a little bit about Edgar Cayce, since
Oh, yes,
his
please.
approach of dream interpretation was based in the paranormal. Edgar Cayce was a country boy from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Grew up a evangelical country Christian. Read the Bible once for every year in his life. The readings are full of King James English, which is terrible to read and understand now. But the information that came across in the readings was just absolutely fantastic. People would write letters with their symptoms of the health problem. He would go into a trance-like state and wouldn't remember a thing that he said, but he would basically say, yes, we have the body, and then go through the different systems in the person's body and come up with different recommendations for treatment. And what's amazing about these is that he did not have any background at all in medicine or health, but he presaged the recommendations of the American Heart Association, for instance, for nutrition. He is called the father of holistic medicine. 2 doctors that I met, Bill and Gladys McGarry, on a trip to the Middle East I took when I was 13, with the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the Edgar Cayce Foundation Group. They went on to found the American Holistic Medical Association and used the Edgar Casey readings in their medical practice, where I also practiced as a social worker practitioner, um, applying the Edgar Casey readings. And uh, so I was very impacted by the material from Edgar Casey readings from the time I was about 12. In fact, one of the first things in the readings that I came across was his statement that one should look at their dreams because all the important events in your life are first presaged in your dreams. I read that and I thought, wow, if that's accurate at all, then maybe I should start recording my dreams and maybe looking at them, you know? Maybe I could head off some kind of a problem in the future in my life if I did. So I started recording my dreams. And on this trip to the Middle East, which I was so fortunate to take when I was 13 in 1963, we went to Greece, Italy, Rome, in Italy, took a steamer tour down the Nile in Egypt. We went to Israel and Lebanon and Jordan before there was a wall when you could go back and forth. And we talked to people who remembered past lives, people who were faith healers. Every morning we got up and we worked on our dreams over breakfast. Also, I was introduced to meditation. We did meditation every morning before breakfast. So I was with an amazing group of people, including some people who were absolutely psychic. One fellow could lie down and give life readings, and he did that some on the group. A trip. Ida Rolf, who was the inventor of a bodywork, impressive bodywork called Rolfing, was also a member of that trip. So here I was, a boy from Little Rock, Arkansas, the center of the known universe. Ha 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 ha
That's
ha.
true.
Thrown among all of these incredible people studying all of this amazing holistic health and paranormal information and dream work and meditation at the age of 13. So when I got home, I was like a fish out of water. You know, I mean, who could I talk to? Where was my peer group? There was none. So I threw myself into all kinds of books from my grandmother's library, who had been into New Thought, into the Fillmore's work. They founded the Unity Movement, into the work of Ernest Holmes,
Mm-hmm.
the Mary Baker Eddy. She was into all that stuff. In fact, one of my earliest memories was walking into my living room at the age of about 4 or 5 to see my grandparents and my parents around a card table saying prayers and reading Bible passages and doing the Ouija board to contact a spirit by the name of Aun, who said that he had been Daniel in the Old Testament. My sister later, one of my sisters, Annette, later translated all this information. And basically, the message of all of this was the first lesson is to be aware of the presence of God at all times. So the reason I'm saying all of this is to say that I was steeped in the paranormal and New Thought before New Age ever got to be a thing. This was like in 1954. And I think that part of my interest in dreams got scripted by my experience in Presbyterian Bible School when I was a kid with the story of Joseph of the Coat of Many Colors, who was a dream interpreter for Pharaoh. So I was named after my father and my grandfather, but I think I got somewhat scripted into interest in dreams
Oh, I
through
did
that.
not know that. That is so interesting. What a
I
great
didn't
name
figure that
then.
out. Yeah, I didn't figure that out until I was in my late 20s or something. But anyway, I got very interested in dreams, did a whole lot of dream reading and a lot of dream work, but I was not very happy with it. Um, I kind of fell out of love with it in my 20s. And the reason why is because I was uncomfortable telling other people what their dreams were about. I just didn't feel that smart. I didn't feel like I was, who was I to be able to know them well enough to tell them what their dreams were?
You were
So although I
Joseph.
can, pardon me? Oh,
You were
no, I
Joseph.
was not, I was not that Joseph. So no. I was looking for alternatives, I suppose. And in graduate school, when I was studying for my clinical social work master's degree before I got my PhD, I took some courses from a very interesting man named Joe Hart, who taught Jacob Marino's psychodrama and also his sociometry. Now, Jacob Marino was a younger contemporary of Freud's. He was also a psychiatrist, and he was a firm believer in growth through creative play. And he developed psychodrama as sort of the progenitor of every action technique you can think of, T group technique you can think of. He actually was kind of the father of shadow work, along with Jung and his active imagination. I mean, also Pearl's Gestalt is derived from Moreno's work. So this guy was really an amazing guy, and nobody really knew about his sociometry, but I studied it. And to make a long story even longer, what sociometry does is it asks questions about how to reorganize groups so that they can be more effective. For instance, if you have a group of kids who are studying math, Marino would say, well, how could you rearrange this group so that you have people studying with each other so that they learn better? And so he asked questions. He asked questions of the kids. Who would you most like to learn math with? Who would you least like to learn math with? And then he took this data, put it in a grid, and he found out who in the class were the stars, those who were most chosen, those who were the rejects, those who were the isolates, who mutually chose each other. And then you could put that into a diagram called a sociogram, and then study the relationships among the different group members. Okay. And they have used his sociometric method in polling applications and industrial applications, many school applications since then. And he developed this in the 1920s. All right. Well, I read this, and it was just part of my course of study. But after I graduated, I was running a pain treatment program, and Joe Hart called me one day and said, hey, Joe, can you develop a talk on pain treatment and sociometry? And I thought, and I said, Joe, I'm not sure, but I think I can do one on sociometry, pain treatment, and dreaming. Would that be okay? And he had gotten my gears going. I thought, well, what if you treated the characters in a dream like members of a social group? You listed them, and then you became each of the different characters in your dream, gave the preferences number values, like for instance, like a lot, love, dislike a lot, hate, no preference. Give each of those a numerical value, and then you could put those preferences in a grid, total them, and you could find out which characters liked each other the most, which were most preferred, which were isolated, who was rejected, who the mutual choices were. What could that possibly tell you about why the dream happened in the first place and what it was about? And so I took one of my dreams and I applied this, and I was just absolutely amazed at what I found. It just basically destroyed my interpretation of what I thought the dream was about. And I really couldn't believe this. I thought, well, am I making this up? After all, this is just fantasy. I'm just putting words in these characters' mouths.
Did you have
because
just a traditional understanding of the dreams, like the most of us do?
Yes. I don't remember. The specific dream now was about a car wreck and a car hitting a bridge that was driving up a river. Okay. And I had a normal interpretation. Whenever I work with a dream with people, the first thing I do is I ask them for their associations to the dream. so that we can surface whatever the interpretation is that the dreamer has. And so, yeah, I had put down my interpretation, and what these characters had to say sometimes agreed with me, sometimes disagreed with me, sometimes disagreed with each other. And I thought, my God, I've got a menagerie on my hands. Look at all these different perspectives that I'm getting in touch with. And so, not being a very trusting person, I suppose, I worked on over 100 of my own before I ever worked with a single client. And the reason why is because I didn't trust myself and I didn't trust the method. It had to prove itself to me. And the way it did that is that I would ask these characters from the dreams questions about life issues that were important to me at the time. Well, how would you deal with, you know, my bitchy wife? Ha ha ha. Whatever. Okay. And get their opinion. And then I would test those recommendations in my life by saying, okay, well, let's put them to the test. They say, don't uh, don't defend yourself when your wife says something critical to you. Just keep your mouth shut, something like that. And so I would try that,
Isn't that the
and
best
then I would.
approach?
I have many bruises from not following my advice. So over the
My
period of
own
years,
advice, right?
yes. So anyway, I I became convinced personally that I was getting uh, feedback that was valid and valuable. You know, the paranormal, for it to be scientific, you have to use an empirical method to test it. And so this is what I was doing. I was testing what I got. I wasn't just saying, oh, I have an insight that this dream is correct and therefore it's accurate, and then going with that and trusting that I knew what the dream said. No, I was actually tabling my own interpretations and then attempting to ask perspectives that were embedded in this or that dream, why they were there, what the dream was about from their perspective, what their interpretation was. Because after all, they are in the dream and they might know a whole lot more about it than me. All right. So uh, it was not until about 1982 that I started working with clients. One of the first was a lady who had
So it was about
agoraphobia.
10 years or 9 years for you.
Well, no, actually, I developed the method in 1980. So I had been working on my own dreams for about 2 years before I started working on it with
Mm-hmm.
clients. And what happened was that this lady had agoraphobia, which meant that she was housebound. She had been so housebound that she had developed a newsletter for other agoraphobics about all the different treatment methods that were out there. So she was not just an agoraphobic, she was an intelligent agoraphobic, a well-informed agoraphobic. All right. And so I said, well, what do you say we try this? I don't know if it'll work or not. So I took her through the sociometric process with her own dreams, several of them. And lo and behold, she started having dreams in which she was in out of her house and she was in groups. Like, well, I remember one where she was at a basketball game. And so she was starting to have dreams as a result, or I don't know, result may be too strong a word, but parallel with working with the sociometric process, she was starting to have dreams in which she was being comfortable in being in groups. And then she started reporting that she was being okay leaving the house and going into different group settings. And so I looked at this. This was over maybe about a 6 week period, and I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. Agoraphobia, somebody who's chronic agoraphobic getting better. Wow. So I started working with some other clients, and what I found was that the approach would get rid of almost every nightmare in just one session, with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, I had excellent results. I've been trying to get it into the veterans system with no avail to help all these poor veterans who are been stuck for years with post-traumatic stress disorder. I did
Oh,
I
that
did
that
have
that
the
is so
opportunity.
sad because I think that this work would be so important and relieving all
I
that
agree.
stress. It's not just stress, it's a nightmare that they live in.
Absolutely.
Is it just over there in Berlin that you find that you're having difficulty with the veterans, or have you tried the American veterans or the Canadian veterans to suggest this?
Well, yes, I have in the past, not the Canadian, but the American. I lived in the United States until I moved to Germany in the Berlin area in 2008. So, that's most of my life. But I have not been affiliated with any uh, institution that might sponsor connection. I have not really done much published research that would also result in giving me a kind of a veneer or patina or notoriety. And so if I approach these people in these institutions, they kind of say, well, who are you? And, why should I listen to what you have to say? As they well should. All right. So I'm also not a natural marketer. I'm much more of a theoretician than I am a marketer. So there are good reasons why I have not been more successful in getting my approach out there to more people who need it. And I regret that because, like I said, I think uh, it's testable based on people's application of the process itself. But I can tell you a couple stories. I remember one lady, an Israeli, who wrote to me about PTSD and terror nightmares that she was having as a result of a terrorist attack on her home many years before. And she'd been waking up with nightmares ever since. And I don't remember how she got my name or learned about my work, but anyway, I didn't even talk to her. All I did was send her a copy of the questionnaire, the protocol that I had developed. And she used it with her own recurring PTSD nightmare. And the way I knew that is she wrote me back later and said, I don't know how to thank you. I did this interview. I haven't had any of these nightmares since. Okay. So people who've had repetitive dreams, they wonder why they keep having them. Maybe they're not nightmares. Generally, one interviewing process will get rid of recurring dreams. I've seen that happen again and again enough times to where I'm pretty confident that most anybody not only can get rid of these sorts of dreams if they want to, but maybe more important, they have an understanding about why they had them. And I think that's the key. Instead of projecting their own understanding onto the dream, this is about listening to what the perspectives embedded in the dream have to say. And that's one of the reasons my work is called integral deep listening, because it's about listening in a way we don't normally do. We're normally about getting a validation, getting confirmation bias for our own assumptions. Okay. And people want to do that. That's cool. But for those who don't and who wonder why they keep stuck creating the same mistakes again and again in their life and want to see where they're stuck, these perspectives, in my experience, have a very effective way of showing people reframings that can help them to get unstuck.
You say that the work that you do, not just you say, but people report back to you and saying that their life was transformed. So the work that you do is not only transformational, you said, but also transrational. I was trying to see how could it be transrational? Because to me, it is pretty rational. But at the same time, why would all mythology, all the religious currents and religious books, why would they all speak in a metaphorical language, symbolical language? And then the dreams, our dreams are also, they speak to us. This is how our souls speak to us in a symbolic language. And why would it speak in a symbolic language? For example, you mentioned that before you dove into the entire dream world and started working in it. You said that you had a pretty conventional understanding of your dreams. And then, like most of us, of course, and once you learned about it, it just blew your mind. So, being the dreams can be perceived as trans-rational. That is my understanding. But in fact, they are pretty rational if you look deeper into it and involve deep listening. Am I understanding it correctly?
The name integral deep listening helps to answer that question. Integral is a reference to the work of the philosopher Ken Wilber. And one of the concepts that is in his integral approach has to do with human development through 3 stages, from the pre-personal, which involves embedded in beliefs and myth, to the personal, which is at first identification with groups and then with thinking and learning how to think rationally. And then when and if we learn to do those 2 things, we have the possibility to move into the transpersonal. All right. And the transpersonal can be described in a number of ways. It can involve the paranormal. Usually that's associated with the first transpersonal stage in Wilber's work. The second is often called the subtle stage, or the path of saints, where you maybe have Tibetan visualization, dream yoga. The third is a causal approach to the transpersonal, which is formless, maybe like the work of Nagarjuna or Meister Eckhart in the Christian tradition. And then beyond all stages is called the non-dual. Now, along with the pre-personal, personal, and transpersonal, you have the pre-rational, the rational, and the trans-rational.
Mm-hmm.
Just like in order to get to the transpersonal, you have to build upon the pre-personal and the personal. So to get to the trans-rational, you have to have integrated a rational understanding. All right. And that's what a problem I find with a lot of approaches to dream work, or even the paranormal or life in general, is that people attempt to leapfrog the rational and the personal, and in order to scramble and transform into the transpersonal and the transrational. All right. And you just can't do that and have an authentic transpersonal or authentic transrational practice. Now, I'm going to stop there because I don't know if that answers your question or not, my dear.
It does, and we're diving so deep into that, and I would like to discover that further. But I wanted to mention first, go back to your comment about Edgar Cayce and stating that our dreams show us the main events of the future. And I haven't heard him personally, not personal, of course, I wouldn't be able to hear him personally talk to me about it. But I haven't heard him say that. And that is so incredible that you mentioned it right now, because for many years, since I was 16, I've been recording my dreams. And this has been my understanding that the déjà vus that we may have, or we have, are actually or were described already to us in our dreams years earlier. And in my case, it would be a year, could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, or even 10 years prior. And that is incredible to me in understanding that our future may be predetermined. And if we look at this trans-rational approach, we may think that that if the future is predetermined, then how do we change conditions in it? Are we the masters of our own universe? Or is this symbolic understanding of our life would actually help us to navigate through life and help us on our journey? And if we dismiss completely our dreams and dream stories, we are robbing ourselves of the deeper understanding of our life and what you call it, to get rid of drama through dreams.
And to get quite functional and to get quite practical, very few people understand how their dreams impact on their physical and their psychological, emotional health. Okay? But think about it. Let's say you have a dream, go to sleep tonight, and you have a dream where you're maybe confused. Maybe you're slightly anxious. All right? Neurotransmitters are released. They're associated with that anxiety. They're fight or flight neurotransmitters. These particular chemicals are there to prepare your body to either defend yourself or to run like hell. Now, the problem is that in dreams you have a kind of a atonia, which means that you are paralyzed chemically so that you can't kill yourself by acting out a dream, all right? So what does that mean about these chemicals? Well, these chemicals are released. In your waking life, you'd either run them off or fight them off. But guess what? You can't do either one. So what happens to these chemicals, these very strong neurochemicals that are just sitting there in your body? Well, they're like battery acid, and they eat away. And what do they eat at? Well, it depends on what your weakest system is. For one person, it might be their lungs. Another, it might be their cardiovascular. Another, it might be their immune system. But whatever it is, that's the one that gets chomped on.
I love it.
And the deal is that nobody figures it out. They wake up in the morning and maybe they're a little on the edge, maybe they're a little uneasy. Let's say they had therapy the day before and they came out of that therapy session, they felt great. Then guess what they did in their dreams? Most of us regress into childhood scripting and drama in our dreams. Just look at your dreams. So what that means is that you're likely to undo the work you did the day before because of all the reinforcing of old habits in your dreams, even if you don't remember them, okay? And so what I'm trying to convey here is that our dreams aren't just for transpersonal, transrational, paranormal uses. They have an extremely powerful, ongoing impact on our life, especially since average person spends 5 years of their life dreaming.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what I meant. If we call it transrational, like you mentioned in one of your talks that you gave, in my understanding that it is pretty rational. And rationality comes in direct applications into our reality, into our lives as it is right now. So if it has such incredible impact on our lives and understanding of ourselves, it does become rational and realistic in our lives, and we're able to apply it personally to ourselves in the solution of many problems of our lives. And in my life, of course, in my life, and just actually happened just recently when you and I had the dream interview. I am going to report it live right here that I was able, just with one interview that I had with you, to get rid of 3 of the issues that you and I discussed before. So during the interview, you mentioned, not just you mentioned, you asked what are the 3 main issues in the person's life. And I had no idea before you asked me that I had any issues in my life, but I did, and I voiced them out. And in fact, just through one recurrent dream, and there's a reason why it is recurrent, because your subconscious, your soul just tries and just knocks at the door. Sometimes that the first time, like really quietly, knock, knock. And then you're like, okay, I don't care about your dream. Just get away. It is so not rational. It is nonsensical. And then the dream comes back and they're like, knock, knock. And you're like, oh, just the second time, oh, just a coincidence. So just such a nonsense. And you dismiss it. And then the third time is like, knock, knock. And the door is being punched out. And then you're like, okay, something is there. And then you see the pattern. And when I saw those patterns, and when you were able to help me to see those patterns and talk to my subconscious, I was able to get rid of first, procrastination. That was huge for me. And I knew the reasons, the background story, why I was doing all of that, just through personifications of my dream. And that was just one dream. Imagine that we spoke to our dream, asked our dream characters on a regular basis and how that would affect our life.
Now, if you had come to me as a therapist and I had attempted to help you, you wouldn't have been able to get rid of those issues in one session. Why? Because I'm not you and I'm not that smart. It doesn't matter that I've done therapy for 50 years. I'm not you. I don't know what the keys are to turn the tumbler of the combination that unlocks the particular mindfuck that you have. Okay? We all have ours, right? But you do. And not only you, but these different perspectives that are a part of you and that know you better than you know yourself in some cases.
Absolutely.
So,
and that's how it was in my case. That's how it was in my case.
Mm-hmm. Why not go to sources that are experts instead of pontificating and pretend that I know something that I don't?
That's absolutely true, because I assumed that I knew so much about dreams, and I'm able to interpret them pretty well. And of course, you have to take the person's personal history into account, and then to make the dream interpretation for them. It's not just we take the dream book, and say, oh, this is a symbol of this. Although very much it could be that historically, mythologically, one particular symbol can symbolize a certain thing. Of course, I'm not dismissing that, but it is not like going to the books and looking at the symbol and what it represents and being able to determine what your dream actually means. So in this case, just because I was able and willing to go deep and into my own soul and understand, I was able to transform it in just one session. But I really wanted to do that. And to me, like I mentioned before, that you and I do pretty similar work, but I didn't dive as deep. And when speaking with you, I was able to tackle those problems. In my understanding, it is very powerful. And when people come to you and they report back, they I'm sure that they're very grateful. However, you mentioned also in your talks that the transformational change may not last, and we should be willing to do our work on ourselves and not just rely, like I mentioned, on the therapist. What does it involve, Dr. Dillard, to have a lasting transformational change?
Our dreams are always there, and they're one step ahead of us. I call these characters emerging potentials because, in my experience, they largely represent possibilities or potentials that are emerging into our awareness. They want to be born. They want to be heard. They want to be recognized. They want to be acknowledged. Mostly we don't. We don't feel we need to. We don't want to. We got other things to do. We got bills to pay, yada, yada, yada. But they're emerging potentials that are harbingers of a potential future that we can either embrace or we can ignore. Most of us choose to just go along our merry way and say, hey, I've got enough on my plate already. Now, integral deep listening is divided into 3 different approaches that uses interviewing in order to try to change that. The 3 approaches have to do with healing, balancing, and transformation. Now, in the first part of our lives, we're all about trying to gain control, figure out who we are, what to do, where to be. In the second part of our lives, we're all about trying to balance the demands of work, family, get everything balanced. And then if we're lucky, maybe we're able to transform here and there, all right? But most transformations don't last, okay? And the reason why is because we're creatures of habit. So like people will have near-death experiences. I've worked with a lot of people who have had near-death experiences. They usually don't have a lasting impact, a lasting transformative ability because of the strength, not only of habit, but because of the reinforcement of our environments. People want us to be the way we've always been. They don't support the transformation. So people generally don't maintain their transformations. So with integral deep listening, the first 3 processes have to do with healing, and they involve learning about our scripting and deciding which parts of it are toxic and which are healthy, keeping the healthy parts, jettisoning the toxic parts, creating a healthier script, and then subjecting that script to our emerging potentials and finding out how to align it with our, what I call our life compass, which is a sense of direction that's innate, like a gyroscope or a North Star that exists within everyone. The second part has to do with drama, recognizing the difference between healthy and toxic drama and exiting the toxic roles of persecutor, victim, and rescuer in the 3 realms of relationship, thinking, and our nighttime dreams. The third part of the healing process has to do with getting rid of delusional and toxic thinking. And this shows up in the emotional cognitive distortions, which cognitive behavioral therapy deals with. It shows up in the booming field of cognitive biases, which are inherited, they're genetically built in, that are like generalities, heuristic generalities that are often effective, but specifically are inaccurate, that create confused thinking. I'm not going to go there, but there's a whole thing people need to know about cognitive biases. And the third is logical fallacies, learning how to think straight, basically, in a rational sort of way. So those are the 3 healing elements. Then the 3 balancing elements have to do with goal setting. Most people don't set reasonable, healthy, useful goals in any kind of functional way. So we teach that. Then the second part in balancing is assertiveness. learning how to tell the difference between aggression and passivity and assertiveness. And then the third has to do with problem solving. And the approach to problem solving that integral deep listening involves seeking the advice of dream characters and the personifications of life issues that we get in touch with, like the knife that's the stabbing pain in our back, or the fire that's burning in our head with a headache. Talking to those and learning from those perspectives in order to solve problems. So those are the three balancing perspectives of the integral deep listening, coaching, practitioner, and training curricula that we're developing. Then the transformational elements are the interviewing, meditation, pranayama, and then setting intent, setting a clear intention for who you are, where you're going, what your life is about. So the reason why I'm talking about all that is that transformation sticks when we address all three of those areas of our life: healing, balancing, and transformation. If we're just trying to focus on one piece of the puzzle, the problem is that it's like trying to run a 8-cylinder engine on one cylinder or 2 cylinders. It ain't going to work. Okay, so to use the integral terminology, the approach needs to be multi-perspectival, which means that you need to keep in mind, you need to juggle several balls in the air, because your life is made up of a lot of different roles, a lot of different demands, interests, needs, people with different priorities. And so that's why we interview a lot of different characters, is so that we can get in touch with a whole lot of these different perspectives, increasing the odds that we're going to find the ones that really hit the nail on the head in terms of helping us where we are blind.
When you talk about releasing drama in life, at the very beginning, when I got to know you, I did not quite understand what that meant. And I thought, okay, like the drama that we have in life, there's certain personal problems, relationship problems, like a wife hitting you on the head with a skillet, right? But in fact, what happens here, why we behave in certain ways, is because we have our own deep-seated issues that are prompting us to behave in a certain way. And by doing dream sociometry, we are able to tackle the original problems that are seated in us, because when we try to get a speck out of somebody's eye and not seeing the log in our own, that could be a big problem, which is a problem. Nowadays, we see just the tiny speck, but we're the bearers of the heaviest logs ourselves, right? And our eyes are just so, those logs are stuck in our eyes and we cannot even see through those logs. That is a huge problem nowadays in the modern world. If we just look at in every aspect of our society, including the political, economical, personal. So to me, as I got to know you better and the work that you do, it is working on ourselves. And does not necessarily mean just a simple visit to you to maintain that transformation, that alchemical transformation. Nothing good comes easy. And this has been my understanding throughout the ages. I keep myself talking to ages, but I guess I'm talking about my soul, my eternal soul throughout the ages. I guess this is what I have been understanding. And that lasting change in my understanding throughout the years of my conscious life always comes through work. Nothing magical happens just by if you were to have a magic wand, perhaps that in the fairy tales, that would be possible. And even then, the characters and fairy tales, they had to do tremendous work in order for that to happen and to do the internal transformational work. And that is important to be able to sit with yourself and ask yourself questions, and to continue to do that deep work on yourself to bring that lasting change. That worked for me. And that also worked for the patients of yours. And I'm sure Dr. Elliott would also agree with me because nothing also came easy to him, and he had to work really hard on attaining certain things in this life, whether personal or transpersonal. We can all agree with that, whether we want it or not. So the work that you do is absolutely important, because what you do, you increase the wakefulness. And when we, in our wakeful state, and that is the goal of the dream sociometry and the work that you do, because when in sacred books that particularly in the Bible, I would read that we're all asleep and we need to wake up. What does it mean to wake up? I'm walking around my life with eyes open, even if I have tons of logs in my eyes, I'm still awake, right? I'm awake. But what does it really mean to be awake, to be awakened? That you also speak, I heard you speak about the enlightenment. How do we reach that enlightenment? And there are people who are enlightened, and at the same time, they could behave in not so enlightened ways. Now,
the problem is that the word enlightenment has a lot of different meanings. It can be a feeling, it can be a end state, it can be a particular line of development, say spiritual. It can, it's an ambiguous sort of thing. And like you point out, a person can be way ahead in one aspect of enlightenment, like meditate all the time, and be way down on other lines. I'll give you a couple of examples. Zen monks in Japan meditate all the time. During World War II, they took up rifles and fought for the emperor. Okay, in Tibetan Buddhism, it was a feudal society. Most of the land belonged to the monasteries. The majority of people were indentured servants who didn't go to school, didn't have any freedom to leave the land. They didn't have really a source of income. They traded their labor for food. This in one of the most exalted spiritual, metaphysically advanced, non-dual, mystical communities that the world's ever produced. Okay, so I have really changed my thinking about the importance of focusing on self-development and attaining enlightenment over the years. I've maybe gotten hit over the head or hit in the face too many times by the injustices in the world. Okay. To where I have felt very self-centered to be focused on my own development. When I have had so many opportunities and been given so many things by people I've never even met. When there's so many people who have so much less than I do. So I'm much more interested now at this stage in my life in issues of justice than I am in issues of personal development and enlightenment. I think that there's a time and a place for all of these things. It's just that I have seen too many people who, in my opinion, were imbalanced because they were too focused on personal development and pursuing their own enlightenment. As I confess, I have to say about myself for a lot of my life that I think I was as well. So I think the way that you correct that is you get back down to the lowest common denominator treating people as you'd want to be treated, which is called reciprocity and is the basic golden rule of all world religions. You get down to the basics of morality, which is supposed to be the foundation of all religions, and that has to do with mutual respect, has to do with showing that you're trustworthy. It has to do with the ability to really empathize with the needs and the concerns of other people instead of just projecting your own assumptions about what other people need onto them. So when we practice deep listening to personifications of our life issues or to dream characters, we're respecting them. We're treating them as equals. We're not saying, oh, why should I listen to this spit on the sidewalk because it's just imaginary spit and it's just a secular dream. It doesn't have any spiritual meaning. What could it have to do with anything? Well, how do you know that? You don't know it until you interview it, until you talk to it, until you become it, until you empathize with its perspective and hear what it has to say. That shows basic respect toward it that you would want others to show toward you. So it's a basic moral concept that underpins integral deep listening and is supposed to thereby teach that to people who go through the process, that these are basic ways that we need to treat all life instead of making judgments that, oh, some dreams are shamanic and transpersonal and spiritual, and other dreams are secular and unimportant and supposed to be ignored. How do you know that? How does anybody know that? Nobody knows that. They just assume that. How do you know if it's true or not? Well, you don't until you interview the characters and find out if or not they're spiritual, if or not they're a part of yourself. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Maybe most all of us have had dreams of visitations where we had dead relatives come to us in our dreams. All right. Are they really the dead relative, or are they some aspect of ourselves, or are they both? How do we know? Well, we wake up and we say, well, yeah, that really was my grandmother, Ida. Well, yeah, that's the way it felt. Let's see what Ida had to say. Maybe she agrees. So I have had those visitations, and I've asked those questions of numerous characters. And I've often had very interesting responses like, yeah, I really am your friend Jess who killed himself in a plane crash. And yeah, I really am dead. And boy, I wish it hadn't happened. And here are 3 things I want you to tell my wife for me, please. That kind of thing. But he would also say, yeah, and I'm also an aspect of yourself. And I represent this and that characteristic of you. So instead of jumping to conclusions, why not show respect? Why not ask these dream characters, regardless of how real we think that they are, why they're there, why they showed up in our dream? Makes sense to me.
It makes perfect sense. However, if we look at that in the sense of enlightenment and going back to that concept, I am so glad that you mentioned there are different degrees, and a lot of us, we don't understand what is happening there, and we think that, oh, we're enlightened. We went through a course of 500 seminars on enlightenment and how to improve yourself, and we're enlightened people, because I see so many people saying, oh, I'm enlightened. Oh, just tell me what it is. Or maybe I don't want to know what it actually means for you. But through the dream sociometry, it is one of the ways, in my understanding, to be enlightened. Meaning, what is enlightenment? Is letting the light in, is cracking the code, letting the light in and understanding your life in a different perspective, bettering yourself. And also by bettering yourself, you are able to treat the world around you better. Because if we treat the world badly as it is now, that we look at ourselves and other people around us and societies as a whole, justice comes also from not understanding of ourselves, our personal issues, and the issues of our countries. We are not willing to let the light in. And if we talk about enlightenment as just some sort of a end goal that we need to attain and completely dissolve in the universe and never reincarnate on this earth back again, it is the one thing. Perhaps some people have that goal. I am far from that being my necessary goal, but however, I am on this earth and I'm in this body, and I like practical approaches. So that being enlightened and to go and treat other people better, to take all those logs out of your eyes and actually go and change yourself first and not hurt others and other nations. So the justice also comes from enlightening yourself or understanding yourself. So I completely agree with you on that.
I probably would have sold a whole lot more copies of my book, Waking Up, if I had called it Enlightenment instead of Waking Up.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But you have to be honest and truthful to yourself.
And I think also, I guess for me, it's about being realistic.
Absolutely.
Waking up is a process. Enlightenment sounds more like a final state, okay? And I think people, if they realize that it's a process, then they might think, well, I need to make a commitment to my own development. I need to take up life practices that are going to leverage me out of my lifelong addictions to worry or confusion or to self-criticism or to smoking or alcohol or yada, 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 whatever it is, okay? It's not going to be some kind of a quick, superficial kind of thing. I need to have a real authentic grounding in something that's authentic for me. And that's what integral deep listening tries to do, is to put people in touch with what wants to be born from within them. That's the authentic way forward for them out of their stuckness, whatever that is.
You know, years back when I would read Leo Tolstoy, we all know about him by his War and Peace and Anna Karenina. I would read his statement and not understanding what it actually means when he said, we are not only responsible for ourselves, we are responsible for the world around us. And I thought, how can I be responsible for the world around me? You know, that I'm responsible for myself, and whatever other people do, I'm not responsible for that. Taking responsibility for anything else is just too much work. And why would I want to do that? And later, when I let the light in, we're going to avoid that term being enlightened. When you let the light in, when you transform yourself and you better understand it and you better yourself up, right? I understood that not only that I'm responsible for myself and my own actions, but my actions and my treatment of the world, by all of that, I'm responsible for the world as well. So being this part of the world is making me being responsible, not just for myself, but for the world as a whole. So if we think that we're just in our own personal individualistic societies, that where we live in the West, that is just me, we have to understand that that's not just me. It's the society for which we're also responsible. And looking at the world as it is right now, it finally gotten to me. And sometimes I cry when I see things that are happening in the world right now. You mentioned justice. Justice needs to be done. Justice. And with a personal development, we can do it on our own and without talking or screaming on every corner that I'm enlightened or I am I have reached the state of higher spirituality, or I'm a saint right now. It's the matter of how to behave yourself in this world and not being quiet about it, but actually voicing out concerns that are out there, about the problems that are out there. And I believe that that is also the part of enlightenment, by not just being quiet and sitting in your corner and observing, but from the observer to become the actual and the active participant. What do you think about it, Dr. Dillard?
I think that every night, people all over the world are having dreams. And I think in those dreams every night, that potentials are emerging of possibilities of how they can make their own personal lives as well as the world as a whole a better place. And I think that a fragment of that seeps into our conscious thinking out of our awareness and slowly works to evolve humanity to a higher state of development. Now, I'm certainly not saying that's the most important or the only element that moves that. I think greater communication means greater awareness. The internet, stuff we see on social media, has a huge impact on waking us up. However, every night in our dreams, our conscious self, which has been about the process of learning to be in control and staying in control, every night it is somewhat dissolved. It moves into a state which it can fly, it can die and be reborn. It is not the same self with the same possibilities as our waking self. Every night we go into that self which has these potentials. What that means is that in our dreams, we move closer to the paranormal. And what I mean by that is that our normal waking reality and our control over it dissolves. And we move into a state of relative chaos. Now, we don't like that word chaos. We think, ooh, bad thing. But the fact is that the less structure that there is, the more opportunity there is for a reformatting of structures. Okay? When structures are dissolved, you have the opportunity for new framings to arise. That's what happens in dreams. It's just that we miss them most of the time because we're not listening. We don't know how, or we don't do it, or we're not interested, but they're there. And what we can do is we can speed that process up if we become co-creators. We move actively into this most paranormal aspect of our 24-hour life cycle. And if and when we do that, we can speed up the co-creative process, not only for our own personal development, but for the enlightenment of the world.
Isn't that the reason why Edgar Cayce, including other predecessors before him, Carl Jung, and many others before throughout the ages, speaking about also mystics of different religious philosophies, isn't it why they try to get into the transpersonal state in order to access this understanding of life? I have
Well, for Cayce, pardon me, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What's for Cayce?
For Cayce, he did a fervent prayer when he was a young boy that he wanted to be of service to other people, especially to children.
Mm-hmm.
And then he fell into the ability to give these readings just sort of by accident. He lost his voice when he was an itinerant salesman at the age of 19, happened across a hypnotist who hypnotized him. And in that state, he gave his own suggestion about how to regain his voice back by suggesting an increased blood flow to the trachea. The trachea turned red for a while, and then it subsided, and he woke up and he had his voice back. And after that point, he was able to be asked suggestions in this trance-like state and to give these psychic readings. So he thought that his, quote, gift came as a result of his fervent prayer as a child. Now, I'm not saying yes or no, true or false. All I'm doing is telling you that that's Cayce's own answer to your question.
Well, very interestingly, that in order to find our own voice, we have to lose the voice that we had before. Have you noticed that? Because that was quite literal in this case, But in fact, if we look at the history and what happened to all these people who gave us writings that actually reached us in our modern world on their own transpersonal experiences, we would see that they had to lose themselves in order to find themselves again, like losing a voice by Edgar Cayce in order to find it again in a different sense. So attaining or getting into those transpersonal states can help you find yourself again, that even if you thought that you were who you were, you can become something that you probably did not think that you could be, in a sense that if you had the purpose of your life and that you had to pursue your particular goal that you have not been listening to, either through your dreams or through different kinds of revelations or through different kinds of various life situations and occurrences, do people come to the understanding of ourselves and to their higher purpose through those transformative states?
Everybody drops down out of control when they go to sleep at night. They suspend control over themselves, whether they like it or not, and then allow a relative state of enlightenment to exist if they have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. But generally people don't. What they do is they either repress it or else they interpret what they remember in terms of their own scripted identity, what they know about symbols, of what their parents have told them, what a dream expert and a dream dictionary has to say, blah, 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 blah. They do everything except listen to the source. And I think the reason why is because that's about suspending your own sense of self when you become a character in a dream. In order to really empathize with its point of view, you've got to be willing to set aside your own beliefs and your own need to be right or to be validated. And most people aren't very good at that. They aren't very good at empathizing. They think they can really tell you what other people are feeling, but they very rarely ask the other person to actually check it out to see how accurate they are. And if they would find out that they maybe had a piece of it, but they missed some important elements.
Well, missing, we are so good about the missing on the important elements of our lives. I'm really interested in how people get to where they are in their lives. And when you shared how you got to the dream sociometry at the very beginning, it exemplifies the process and the path that we take in this life in order, or the quest to find ourselves. Somehow, many of us are on this quest to find ourselves. And a lot of people talk about, oh, I need to find myself. I could be somebody. All we have to do, in my understanding, is that to be ourselves, and we just have to find it. However, why do we not know it at the very beginning of our life? Not most of us. Some of us, rare people, we do know at the very beginning what the life course we're supposed to be taking, more or less, but we have to take those steps in order to the events to develop further and to be shown to us what we can, what path that we should be taking and what the actions to take on this path. But why, as we are born, we don't know? We are not revealed that the information to us, these instructions didn't come to us as we were born. Well, why do we need to find ourselves, Dr. Dillard?
That reminds me of the first module of the IDL healing component, the module on scripting. The idea is that we are multifaceted. We could evolve in many different ways, but our parents are very hopeful and very fearful, and so they want us to grow up to be healthy, strong, creative, and to fit in. And so, based on both their hopes and their fears, we are reinforced or punished before we can even talk or think to become a certain kind of a person, to think in certain ways, partially based on the language that we learn to speak, but it has to do with our ethnicity, it has to do with the country we were born into, it has to do with the religious context that we were born into. All of these shape us in ways that through which our emerging potentials have to manifest. And mine have to manifest through English, whether that's a good thing or not, okay? And then they also have to come through somebody who is an Anglo-American, whether that's a healthy thing or not to reach certain other kinds of people, all right? So I'm saying our potentials are inherently limited by the concrete nature of the environment into which we are born. And then it's up to us to make the most of that scripted structure as a foundation in which to let these potentials emerge. But sometimes it's not obvious, and sometimes it's not necessary, not clear. Like Palestinians, a whole lot of Palestinians grow up in families that want their kids to become doctors. And guess what? A lot of Palestinians become doctors, and good ones. But what if you're born with the heart of a poet, and you grow up born into a family that says, well, you know, you need to be a doctor? Okay, you're going to have to fight the fears, hopes, and disapprovals of your family if you really want to become a poet. They're not going to understand. They're going to be afraid, and you're going to have to deal with it. So, I don't condescend toward people who quote sell out to their scripting, like Germans in 1930s and 40s Germany, basically accepting a society that was dedicated to genocide. It's so easy for me to judge them, but would I have done better if I had been born into that society? I don't think so. I don't think that's a fair thing. Now, would I have been as courageous as a few of those people who stood up and paid the price, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Sophie? I wish I could remember her last name. These people paid a high price, but they lived and they died on their convictions. And I guess my point is that yes, the potential for enlightenment and for finding our own truth and living it is always there, but having the courage and the functional ability within the constraints of our society and our own personal fears is difficult. And our dreams and getting in touch with our emerging potentials through the voices of these dream characters, etc., can be a support community, which we call a sangha. It's a Buddhist word. It means spiritual community. But we can cultivate an internal sangha of support, as well as an external one, which we do with integral deep listening by have students study together, since home study is known for not being people don't finish it very often because it takes a lot of motivation to do home study. So we have people go through it in teams. So people are accountable to each other. They support each other through the whole process, and they create a external Sanha support community for themselves. At the same time, they're developing this internal support community of these various perspectives that they interview.
Now, Dr. Dillard, you mentioned that there can be sometimes dire consequences for people who follow their life path that they have chosen when they fulfilled or were on the way to fulfill their potential. However, are there consequences for not listening to your emerging potential, for not listening to those voices that come within?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think anybody who's realistic and honest with themselves can certainly tell stories about that. I could certainly tell stories about that in my own life. That when I have refused to listen to what I knew and paid the price for it. Okay, so I don't think that's an abnormal thing. It's a rather normal thing, and the best thing I can say about it is that instead of criticizing ourselves, judging ourselves, guilt tripping ourselves, feeling shame, whatever, to go ahead and say, hey, how can I take make lemonade out of this? What can I learn from this so that I can make better choices in the future?
And isn't that the essence of our life, to better ourselves, understand ourselves better, and the world, and treat the world around us in a better way and in a kind way?
Yes, and I do think that as we lift others up, we're lifting up those parts of ourselves that they represent. So it's a shortcut to self-development. If I help you to get unstuck, then I'm also helping the part of myself that you represent to get unstuck. Okay? And so I'm getting a twofer. Instead of just working on myself, I'm developing a support community by helping you. Plus, I'm actually working on myself at the same time indirectly.
Oh,
So it
indirectly,
seems to me a
that is the
smarter way to
best
go.
way. Oh, yes. I've learned so much through my own experience, through that therapeutic process, working with other people. So that is incredible. So, Dr. Dillard, how can people find you?
Go to integraldeeplistening.com, and you can also email me at joseph.dillard@gmail.com. Is that it? joseph.dillard@gmail.com. That's correct. Love to hear from you.
That would be wonderful. So if our listeners and viewers would like to get in contact with Dr. Dillard, you are going to find a well of wisdom, and you will find that wisdom in yourself as well. Well, for today, we are coming to conclusion. But for the next time, stay tuned, because we will be speaking with Dr. Dillard and disseminating the dream, Dr. Elliott's dream. He will reveal one to us, and hopefully we will dive into it in detail and see the transformation in Dr. Elliott, and we will see how it happens.
Well, with that build up, I'm kind of scared that you're going to build it up too much, I'm afraid. But I got to tell you that if we haven't scared Dr. Elliott off with our discussion this time, I'm going to be more than happy and very much be looking forward to our time together next week, Elliott.
Yes, me too. Especially, I'm a veteran myself, retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, 15 years. So I'm gonna spend the next week thinking about a good dream for us to discuss and analyze. And I think your work's absolutely fascinating. And if we have time too, I'd like to talk to you about the paranormal, nightmares, sleep paralysis. There's a whole whack of things that we can cover next week for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
That would be
That'll be
wonderful.
terrific.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you again. And this has been the podcast, Science and the Paranormal, with Dr. Yana and Dr. Elliott. Thank you so much, Dr. Dillard, for joining us today. And we will be seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, how do I turn it off? So this is the end. Elliott left. And hold on a second. Did it stop recording, Dr. Dillard? Or
As
not?
far as I can tell, yes.
Yeah, okay. So it's just both of us. Thank you so. Oh no, it says recording. Huh. It says back as recording. But I'll edit it later. Thank you so very much for joining today. It was a pleasure seeing you. I know that
Thank you very much.
you and I have been communicating, and I would just love to talk to you about different kind of issues online for people to hear that. But the thing is, if we talk about it, then this show is going to be closed. And that is the sadness about it, because we need to be talking about the pertinent problems in life. And I know that Scott Ritter, he is not scared at all, and he talks about it openly. He's being so honest about everything that is happening. And I know that yours and I views fall into the same line as he's talking about, but he's talking about that openly, and you do too, on Facebook. And sometimes I can't comment on that, and that does not represent the shallow soul or faint-heartedness, right? But actually, I want to preserve the podcast that I have. However, I think it is important, would be important to talk about it.
I do run people off by being the skunk at the picnic. You know, they want me to fit into a particular paradigm, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe the dream guy, or the guy who's a therapist, or the guy, you know. But we're all multifaceted, and I don't I don't really need people to agree with me in order to respect them. Okay. In other words, I can love fascists, you know, as human beings. Okay. Um, they're just scared of things, just like I am scared of things. And, you know, maybe they've done terrible things to people. Well, what are you going to do about that in the future? You can't undo the past, but you can make better choices about the future. So the point is that, yeah, I am pretty upfront on Facebook, and a lot of people don't like it. But you know, like I said, I don't have to talk about that. I can that's just one aspect of my life. But if people want to punch that button, then I will tell them what I think. Not because I think I'm right, but just because uh, by talking about these things, I may get a different point of view expressed to me that may teach me something. Yeah. But if I don't speak up, then maybe I won't get educated. You know,
What about other people educated through your viewpoints?
that's up to them. You know,
Yeah.
if a person wants to call me an anti-Semitic and then blow me off, as far as I'm concerned, that's their loss. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't have anything, I don't have any control over that. In the integral community, I do write a lot of essays, and I do engage there because those people believe they're enlightened, and they communicate to other people as if they are enlightened. And I think that's a terrible misrepresentation of what integral is. And because I've gotten so much support out of that particular way of thinking, I have an investment in terms of wanting to make integral a better thing. So I get on there and I spar with some people, and I argue and fight with some people about that. But it's not to be right. It's about, you know, how can you excuse injustices being done to other people? Um, in our name with our money.
That's
I
true.
just, I just, so anyway,
I was talking to my fiance yesterday, and I said, you know what? I think you and I, in this society here, we're going to be just lonely for the rest of our lives because our viewpoints are just too radical for people, and that they would rather devour us than to listen to us. And so we don't talk. The thing is that he always advises, oh, yeah, why don't you just respond and tell people why they're wrong? Like, for example, coming and telling me that Putin is a killer, right? And I told them that, when people come to you and they tell you that, they don't have any intent of learning otherwise. They don't have any intent of learning. So if you present those arguments to them, they will never listen to it. So when people say stuff like that, there's no intention to listen or learn anything about it. And he's been
and
following your writings, and he is just so in love with you. He respects you deeply. And
who?
my fiance, Christian,
Oh, well,
he
that's very nice of him. Anytime he'd like to ask me questions or I can help, love to.
All right, that would be wonderful, wonderful. Yes, because he's always been asking me how Dr. Dillard is, and I would like to talk to him. So perhaps that would be a great thing. And he's Romanian, but
Wonderful.
yeah, nevertheless, he would love to discuss it with you, and me too. I'm gonna be there as well, so we can talk because not that many people share our viewpoints, of like being a skunk at the party.
And as far as speaking up about your views, I tend not to do that. I tend to ask questions. Integral deep listening is an interviewing format where you basically ask questions. Socrates, his whole Elencus method, Elencus method, is one of asking questions. Okay, the Socratic method is questioning.
And the
So
debated truth is born. That's what he said. Debating
yeah,
does
and
not
and
mean fighting.
so if we ask questions, we get information, and then we can learn whether it's worth opening our mouths and speaking or not. Because you're right, if somebody has their mind made up and they don't want to listen, then why talk?
Why talk?
But asking questions is it's a great way to get information. So that's generally also I can feign stupidity when I ask questions. Oh, I'm not sure I understand. Could you please explain da 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 da?
That is so
And that
funny
way,
that you're saying it right now because this is exactly in the same terms he told me yesterday. Ask questions. That is going to reveal the stupidity. So funny. Exactly the
that's
same way.
that's a Socratic method. If you read Plato, you'll find out that's what Socrates was doing all the time, was by asking questions, these people were revealing the contradictions of their own thinking. Of
That
course, he
is
got into
marvelous.
trouble because he
Yeah.
rubbed their noses in their own
Oh,
contradictions.
yeah.
People
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
like that.
Of
Yeah,
course. Of
but
course.
I'm not so much recommending that as much as asking questions to understand, you know, how open people are and where they're also where they're hurting. The reason why interviews start off with 3 life issues is to get to the cut to the chase. What's on your mind? What are your worries? What are your concerns? Everybody, fascists, uh, you know, people who are racist, they've all got life issues. So if you start there, you can often circumvent the ideology and get to where you can make a difference in somebody's life.
True. That's all it is about it. Thank you so much, Dr. Dillard, for your time today. And I look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you next time
All right, darling. I
on
hope you have
Saturday.
a lovely week. Enjoy ringing in the new year.
Oh,
Okay?
yes. You too. You too. And say hello to Claudia for me, please.
Yes, and say hello to your fiance for me too.
We'll
Okay?
do that. Thank you very much. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Good night.